The wind swept across the dusty plains like a whisper from the past, brushing over the creaking sign of a lonely ranch where the mountains met the horizon. The sun was bleeding out over the west, and with it, the memory of another day survived. He came riding through that sunset, a cowboy with eyes too quiet for a man his age and scars that didn't come from bullets alone. His horse's hooves struck the dirt with the rhythm of a man who'd been running from something long enough to forget why. When he saw the house, paint peeling, smoke thinly rising from the chimney, he thought it looked like every other forgotten place he'd passed. But something about that window light made him stop. Inside, she stood by the old wooden table, her hands trembling over a letter she couldn't finish. The widow, Clara May. Her husband had died 2 winters ago, not from illness or war, but something crueler, silence. He rode out one night after their last fight and never came back. Since then, Clara had learned to live between 2 worlds, one of whispers and one of ghosts. When she heard the horse approach, her heart jolted. She reached for the old shotgun by the door, just in case the world had sent another kind of trouble. He knocked, firm but not threatening. When she opened the door, the first thing she noticed wasn't the stranger's face but his eyes. They carried something she recognized. Loss, wrapped in pride. "Evenin'," he said softly, removing his hat. "Horse threw a shoe a few miles back. Mind if I rest here till morning?" Clara hesitated, studying him under the low light. "This ain't an inn," she murmured, her voice hoarse from days without use. "Didn't think it was, Mom," he said. "But you look like you could use someone who remembers what it's like to speak to another soul." Something about his tone made her lower the gun. She stepped aside. "One night," she said, "and you earn it with silence." He smiled faintly, a kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes, and entered. The house smelled of old wood, lavender, and sorrow. He warmed his hands near the fire while she poured coffee. Neither spoke for a while. When he finally did, it wasn't about his journey but hers. "You live here alone?" he asked quietly. "Used to be 2 of us," she replied. "Now it's just me and the ghosts." He looked at her for a long time, then said, "Sometimes ghosts stay, 'cause they don't trust the living to remember." That night, the wind turned violent. The cowboy offered to secure the barn, but before he could step outside, a scream cut through the dark. It wasn't human. It was the kind of sound that carried through bone, like the land itself crying out. He ran toward the noise, finding the barn door half open, the horses restless, and a figure, pale and swaying, standing near the well. "Clara!" he shouted, but she was still on the porch, her candlelight trembling in the wind. When he approached the figure, it vanished. He searched, but there was nothing. Only the cold, the creak of the rope, and the faint scent of lilac, her scent. He returned, shaken. "You see her too," Clara whispered when he told her. "Every man who's tried to help me has." Her eyes were glassy, her hands clenched. "They all left before sunrise." He studied her face, the lines carved by grief and endurance. "And what happens if someone stays?" he asked. Her lips trembled. "No one ever has." They sat by the fire until dawn, both pretending not to hear the faint footsteps upstairs or the laughter that didn't belong to either of them. When morning came, he saddled his horse, ready to leave. But something made him stop, a photograph by the window. A young woman, smiling beside Clara. "Your sister?" he asked. Clara's expression darkened. "Myself," she said softly. "Before I buried my husband. Before I buried who I was." He didn't ride off that morning. Instead, he fixed her fence, mended the gate, and stayed another night, just to help, he told himself. But as the sun set again, the house began to change. The air thickened. The old clock started ticking though it had been broken for years. And when Clara came down the stairs, her eyes looked like someone else's. "You shouldn't have stayed," she said in a voice that wasn't hers. He froze. The firelight flickered across her face, half gentle, half gone. "Who am I talking to?" he whispered. "The woman you saved," she said, or the one who's still trapped? Then she took a step closer, her hands trembling as she reached for the buttons of her dress. If I undress, she asked, her voice breaking, will you stay? Will you still see me? Not the ghost, not the widow, but the woman who hasn't been touched by kindness in years. The cowboy's breath caught. He saw the pain behind her question. Not seduction, but a plea for proof that she still existed. He stepped forward, gently stopping her trembling hands. You don't need to undress to be seen, he said quietly. You already are. Her tears fell like confession. And for the first time in years, the air in that haunted house felt lighter, almost forgiving. Outside, the wind softened. The footsteps upstairs faded. The ghosts, perhaps, had finally found peace in her being seen again. But just as he thought the night had settled, something cold brushed his shoulder, a whisper, soft but clear, don't believe her. He turned, heart pounding, but saw nothing, only shadows dancing in the corners. Clara looked at him, eyes wide. You heard it, didn't you? He nodded slowly. Maybe I did. She shivered, stepping closer. Then you know now, it's not me who's haunted. And as the fire dimmed, his reflection in the window didn't move when he did. The night after the whisper felt endless. The cowboy barely slept, the echo of that cold voice still running through his veins like frostbite. When the first hint of light broke through the curtains, he rose and stepped outside. The ranch was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. He scanned the yard, the well, the barn. Nothing moved except the dust that clung to the air like memory. Clara appeared behind him, wrapped in a shawl, eyes hollow but calmer than the night before. You saw it too, she said. Now you know this place isn't mine alone. He nodded slowly. Maybe it's not the land that's haunted, Clara. Maybe it's grief that found a body to live in. Her mouth twisted into a sad smile. Grief doesn't need a body. It just needs a witness. They shared breakfast in silence. The fire crackled. A single photograph lay on the table, the one of her younger self. The cowboy finally asked what had been clawing at him since the night he arrived. Who was it that whispered? She looked out the window. My husband's name was Eli. The last thing he said before he rode off was that he'd come back when I forgave him. But forgiveness never came. Now his shadow walks this house asking the same question every man after him has asked. Will she stay? The cowboy leaned forward, his voice low. And you think he's keeping you here? I don't think, she said softly. I know, every night, when I dream, he asks me to follow him. But the moment I try, the world freezes, and I wake up choking on dirt. The cowboy's hands clenched. You deserve to breathe again. Clara met his eyes. Then help me end it. At dusk, they went to the well where the scream had come from. The wind had died, but the air was heavy, thick with something unseen. Clara carried a small wooden box. Inside were a ring, a lock of hair, and a burned letter. Everything he left behind, she whispered. If I bury it, maybe he'll let go. They dug into the hard earth together. The cowboy's muscles ached, but he kept going until the pit was deep enough. Clara knelt, lowering the box in. As the soil covered it, the air grew colder, and a faint hum rose from below. A voice, cracked and mournful, slipped through the ground. You buried the wrong thing. Clara froze. Eli. The cowboy grabbed her hand. Back away. But she didn't. Her eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. I have to see him one last time. The ground shuddered. The rope from the well swung violently. A figure began to form from the dust, a tall shape with empty eyes and a wound where a heart should have been. The cowboy drew his revolver out of instinct, though he knew a bullet couldn't stop what wasn't living. The ghost's voice rasped. You kept my name but buried my truth. Clara fell to her knees. You left me. I died for you, the spirit said. You were meant to follow. The cowboy stepped between them. She owes you nothing. The spirit's gaze turned on him. Then why does she see you as me? The words cut like a blade. The cowboy glanced at Clara, and saw it then. The way her eyes softened when she looked at him. The way she'd trembled when he stopped her hands. The ghost wasn't wrong. In her loneliness, she'd begun to see her husband's shadow in the stranger who stayed. Clara's voice broke. Eli. I only wanted peace. The spirit's shape wavered. Then let me go. The cowboy took her shoulders. Say it, Clara, out loud. Let him hear you. Tears streamed down her face. I forgive you. The air shattered with a sound like thunder. The figure's outline scattered into sparks that rose and vanished into the fading sunset. The well went still. The world exhaled. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The cowboy finally said, "It's over." But Clara shook her head. It's never over. Grief doesn't die. It just learns to sleep. That night, they sat again by the fire. The house no longer creaked. The air smelled of rain. Clara handed him a folded letter. You should go when morning comes, she said. You saved me, but this land still remembers what it's lost. If you stay, it'll claim you too. He opened the letter and read the first line in her delicate handwriting. Thank you for seeing me. Morning came slow, painting gold over everything the night had bruised. The cowboy saddled his horse. Clara stood on the porch, her shawl fluttering like a ghost set free. He turned once more. You'll be all right, she smiled faintly. For the first time in years. He touched the brim of his hat. Then I'll be on my way. He rode off toward the rising sun, the ranch shrinking behind him until it was just a dot on the horizon. But when he reached the ridge and looked back one last time, he swore he saw two figures standing on the porch, Clara, and beside her, a man with his arm around her shoulders. He smiled. Some ghosts, he thought, don't vanish, they heal.